Hey everyone, guess what? These 8 weapons weren't just war machines. They were like symbols of being brave, smart planning, and really cool engineering. Every single one had its own story, a story of smart people who stayed up all night working, of army people who practiced super hard, and of a country that refused to give up when others tried to boss them around. America's surprise was not just about weapons shown on a map. It was about finding out something that completely changed how they thought about India. For many years, America has thought of itself as the best at making military stuff, the #1 leader in defense technology, and the only country that could get the world's attention with how strong their weapons were. But when that secret map showed India's 8 powerful weapons, America had to stop, think again, and understand that the future would not be controlled by them alone. The surprise was like being shocked, not believing it, and having to admit India was pretty awesome. What they saw was not a poor country trying to catch up, but a nation that had quietly, steadily, and smartly built weapons that could change things in their area and even around the whole world. This was not the old India. This was a new India, confident, brave, and refusing to compromise when it came to keeping their country safe. The discovery hit a deeper feeling in Americans because they weren't expecting such cool advancement to come from a country they once thought wasn't very strong. America has been used to being the boss, giving defense systems to others, and deciding who gets to become powerful and who must stay weak. India's secret weapons map broke that pattern. It told America and the world that India was no longer waiting for others to say they were good or give permission. Instead, it was making its own future, getting ready with tools that were as good as the powerful countries of the West. The surprise came from realizing that finding out about India's secret weapons, these 8 weapons, were not ordinary. They were made with perfect accuracy, smart Indian people, and smart planning that could compete with some of the most advanced military systems that exist. The surprise made the impact even stronger. America thinks it's great at gathering information, at knowing what is happening in every part of the world before anyone else does. But here was India showing strength that had stayed hidden until the right time. To be caught not knowing was not only embarrassing for America, but also a hit to their feeling of being in control. It showed that the world was changing in ways even the strongest could not completely predict. America's surprise was not only about India's weapons, it was about the bigger truth that who has power was shifting. In their minds, the surprise showed a fear that being the only one with global influence was slipping away. A strong, armed, and determined India meant new friendships, new plans, and new challenges to the control that America had enjoyed for many years. It also meant that America could no longer boss India around as easily as before. Respect would now be demanded, not asked for. Just seeing those 8 weapons on the secret map became a symbol that India had moved beyond being just a player in their area. It was becoming a global force, able to surprise even the greatest superpower of our time. More than weapons, what America saw on that secret map was the example of a nation's determination to rise above fear and depending on others. Steel, firepower, and machinery may show what weapons are made of, but their true meaning is in the spirit they represent. Each of India's 8 weapons was not just the result of technology getting better, it was the reflection of countless sacrifices, never giving up innovation, and the unshakable will of a country determined to keep their country safe. To call them simply tools of war would be to miss the deeper truth, because they were the voices of scientists who worked day and night, of engineers who dreamed of making India not need other countries, and of soldiers who stood ready to defend every inch of their homeland. More than weapons, they were symbols of who they are, pride and bouncing back. What makes these creations special is the thinking behind them. Countries build weapons to dominate, to control, or because of fear. But India's weapons carried a different story. They were designed not as tools of attacking, but as shields of protection, born from the idea that peace comes only when strength is undeniable. Each system showed the vision of a country that believes in defense, not destruction, yet knows the cost of being weak in a hostile world. More than weapons, they were statements of what they planned to do, saying to the world that America's shocking response will decide its own future, that no power will be allowed to boss around its people, and that its independence is non-negotiable. Beyond the hardware, the human spirit woven into these weapons is what truly gave them meaning. Think of the countless failures that turned into successes, the struggles of a nation working under punishments, restrictions, and global doubt, yet refusing to give up. Every missile, every aircraft, every piece of technology was born from a dream stronger than hard times. That is why they cannot be measured in metal or firepower alone. Their value is in the courage and never giving up that created them. When the world saw those weapons, it was not only looking at India's military strength, it was seeing the determination of 1 billion people who believe that their nation is meant to stand tall. To America, these weapons were a surprise, but to India, they were a showing of years of belief and patience. More than weapons, they were mirrors of progress, telling a story of change from a once-ruled nation to a self-reliant power able of inspiring awe. They were reminders that greatness is not bought. It is built piece by piece with vision, discipline, and sacrifice. In that sense, the 8 weapons became more than military stuff. They became the example of India's journey, its courage, and its never-ending promise to protect its future at any cost. National spirit is not something that can be built in a day, nor is it defined by material strength alone. It is born from centuries of struggle, sacrifice, and an unshakable belief in the group identity of a people. When India's 8 weapons appeared on that secret map, what truly stood out was not just the technology, but the spirit that gave birth to them. Behind every missile, every fighter jet, every system of defense lay the story of scientists who refused to surrender, soldiers who trained with never-ending discipline, and citizens who carried in their hearts India's technology advantage, deep love for their country. This spirit is what turned ordinary effort into extraordinary achievement. It was not just about putting together weapons, but about proving that India's backbone is made of bouncing back, self-belief, and unity. The national spirit is what kept India moving forward even when the world tried to hold it back. Years of punishments, restrictions, and being told no could have weakened its resolve, but instead they became fuel to work harder, to innovate, and to rise above limitations. The men and women who worked behind the scenes knew that their work was not for personal recognition, but for the safety and pride of their nation. Every blueprint, every test, every sleepless night was carried by the thought that 1 billion voices were depending on them. That kind of drive cannot be measured in laboratories or defense budgets. It comes only from spirit, the invisible force that binds a nation together in pursuit of greatness. It is this national spirit that shapes the soldier who stands guard at freezing borders without hesitation, knowing that his sacrifice ensures the freedom of millions. It is the same spirit that pushes scientists to attempt the impossible, to build what others doubt, and to succeed when others make fun of them. It is the spirit of farmers, workers, and citizens who may not touch these weapons, but whose determination to keep their nation alive and thriving provides the strength to create them. A true national spirit is collective. It is the merging of individual sacrifices into one powerful identity. When America looked at that secret map, what stunned them was not only the existence of 8 powerful weapons, but the realization that a nation had poured its soul into creating them. National spirit cannot be stolen, copied, or manufactured. It is unique to a people who have walked through pain and hardship, yet chosen to rise to stand and to declare that they will never bow. India's weapons carry that spirit within them, making them far more powerful than the sum of their parts. They were not machines of war, but living proof of the courage of a nation determined to write its own destiny. The true strength of India was not in the weapons themselves, but in the national spirit that made their creation possible. Shift in power is never sudden. It is the result of years of power, of not needing others' silent preparation, careful planning, and the slow building up of strength that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. When India's 8 weapons appeared on that secret map, it was not simply a showing of military hardware. It was the unveiling of a new reality. The world had been used to seeing power held by a few nations with America at the center of influence, but this discovery forced even the strongest to admit that the balance was changing. India was no longer just a regional player seeking recognition. It was coming up as a force able to challenge old hierarchies. The map symbolized a turning point where global dynamics began to tilt, where the monopoly of the few was questioned by the rise of the many. This shift in power was not only about military capability, it was about psychological dominance. The fact that America, with all its spy networks and global reach, was taken by surprise showed that the world could no longer be predicted by the old rules. A new equation was unfolding, one in which India was not a follower, but a creator of destiny. For years, the story of global power had been shaped by Western voices. But now, a new voice was rising, backed by strength, innovation, and determination. The discovery of those weapons became symbolic of this change, reminding everyone that influence was no longer guaranteed by past dominance, but earned by present capability. At the heart of this shift was self-reliance. India had developed its arsenal not by begging for scraps or depending on others, but by investing in its own people, its own scientists, and its own vision. This independence made the shock even greater for America because it meant that India could no longer be controlled through the usual ways of making countries depend on them. A nation that creates its own power is a nation that controls its own future. And that is the greatest sign of a shift in power. It is not only about having stuff, but about freedom, the freedom to decide, to defend, and to define one's path. The shift was also symbolic of a larger change happening across the world. The rise of India was part of a bigger movement where emerging nations refused to remain silent shadows of the superpowers. It was a declaration that global power would now be shared, that the stage was no longer reserved for a few. What those 8 weapons represented was not just military firepower, but the undeniable truth that India had stepped into a position where it could influence global affairs on its own terms. A secret map may have revealed the weapons, but what it truly revealed was a change in destiny. The center of gravity in world spirit of national pride politics was moving, and India was at the heart of that transformation. Symbol of destiny is not just an expression, it is the living truth of a nation that refuses to let others write its future. When India's 8 weapons appeared on that secret map, they were more than tools of defense or markers of power. They were signs of a country taking control of its own fate. For centuries, India had endured foreign control, economic exploitation, and dismissive attitudes from global powers that considered it too weak to stand on its own. Yet every stage of its struggle from independence to modernization was built on the belief that one day India would rise not only as a cultural and economic force, but as a strategic and military power as well. These weapons became the proof that this vision was no longer a dream, but a reality unfolding before the eyes of the world. Destiny is not handed down. It is carved out of challenges, setbacks, and sacrifices. Each of these weapons represented decades of silent battles fought in laboratories, on testing grounds, and in the hearts of those who refused to give up. They told the story of scientists working against punishments, of soldiers standing tall against enemies, and of a people who refused to accept weakness as their identity. In that sense, the weapons were not just machines, they were monuments to the idea that destiny can be shaped by those who dare to believe in it. To see them together on that secret map was to witness the culmination of years of bouncing back, a reminder that India's destiny was no longer in the hands of others, but firmly in its own. A symbol of destiny carries with it the power of hope. For the people of India, these weapons were not symbols of war, but of dignity, of security, and of progress. They represented a shield that would protect the dreams of 1 billion citizens, ensuring that the future they build will not be stolen or dictated by foreign powers. Each weapon stood as a global shift in power, declaration that the sacrifices of the past had meaning, that the struggles of freedom fighters and visionaries had grown into the form of a strong, self-reliant India. It was a message not just to America, but to the entire world. This nation had stepped into the role that history had prepared for it for a long time. When America was stunned by what it saw, it was not simply because of the weapons themselves, but because it realized that India had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. Once a country claims its destiny, no force can deny it. These 8 weapons were symbols that the era of depending on others was over, that India was ready to chart its own path, and that its rise was not temporary but permanent. They were not just creations of technology. They were the example of a future that belongs to a nation unafraid of standing tall in the world, guided by the belief that its destiny is its own to command. Message to the world is never just about words. It is about action, presence, and the undeniable strength that cannot be ignored. When India's 8 weapons were revealed on that secret map, the message was clear to every nation watching. India is no longer a silent watcher in global affairs. It is a power ready to defend its sovereignty and shape the course of its future. This message was not written in speeches or declarations. It was etched in the steel of missiles, the wings of aircraft, and the firepower of systems designed to guard 1 billion dreams. It was a reminder that India is prepared, alert, and unwilling to let its destiny be controlled by outside forces. To the world, the message carried a double meaning. On one hand, it spoke of deterrence, a warning to enemies that any attempt to undermine India's security would be met with unmatched strength. On the other hand, it symbolized reassurance to allies and partners that India stood as a pillar of stability, a responsible power willing to use its strength to preserve peace rather than message of inspiration to disrupt it. This balance of warning and reassurance reflected the maturity of a nation that has learned through history that peace without strength is fragile, but strength without responsibility is dangerous. The weapons themselves became a form of language, a silent but powerful declaration that India would not bow to intimidation, pressure, or blackmail. For too long, global powers had viewed India through the lens of dependency, assuming it would always need support, guidance, or approval. The message to the world shattered that illusion. It declared that India was capable of building, capable of defending, and capable of leading without permission. And it was not arrogance. It was confidence born from bouncing back and struggle. This message resonated strongly, not just in power corridors, but in the hearts of people who saw India as a symbol of hope for nations aspiring to rise against odds. To America, the message was startling. To rivals, it was sobering. To friends, it was inspiring. The 8 weapons revealed more than just capability. They revealed intent, the intent to shape a world where India stands as an equal, not as a follower. The map may have been secret, but the message was loud enough for the entire world to hear. India has arrived, and it will no longer be overlooked or underestimated. At its core, this message was about dignity and sovereignty. Every missile and every defense system represented the will of a people to live free, to protect their land, and to ensure that their voice carries weight in the halls of global power. This was not a threat, but a declaration of presence, a call for respect, and a reminder that true power comes not from domination, but from the ability to protect and uplift one's nation. The world heard the message clearly, and from that moment it was impossible to deny that a new power had risen with strength, vision, and determination.